Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Cynthia Alvarez, and this is the Grand Boulevard Coalition show. As you know, if you were here last week, one of my interns, Lynette, was here with us. Sadly, all of our interns have graduated, but we really do wish them the best in their future endeavors. And I do hope to have some guests in the future. Hopefully, some people from my organization and other organizations that we work with. And yeah, the topic for today will be on youth and prom safety, since we know a lot of kids are going to prom. Some have already gone, some have prom coming up literally tomorrow, or in the coming weeks. So we're very excited for them to have a good time. And yeah, but before we get into that discussion, I just wanted to share a couple things that we were doing in the month of April. Our program, Healthy Living, worked with a organization to host a Prom Expo, and we have some pictures of that. If we're able to share those, and yeah, WGN was able to come in and just kind of capture the moment of us there. We were able to just talk to the youth and do lots of different things with them. We did a workshop, we did community events. There were other people there that gave classes on prom hairstyles, prom dresses were given away, and even a course on like how to talk in heels. As you can see there, we were talking with some kids, giving them resources related to prom safety and overdose awareness information as well. But yeah, just wanted to highlight that. We actually do have another event like that coming up for this same high school. It is not open to the public, but it is for students who go to Perspective Math and Science Academy High School near IIT. So if you are a student there, make sure you're in class that day because it will actually be held on a Friday. So make sure you're there. Their prom is the Saturday after. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. And so getting into our topic today, we are going to be talking about prom safety. And this is kind of something we've already talked about with our youth in at the schools, like I said, and also with some other schools on the west side. We've done some talks with them. We did talks revolving around things that can happen at prom, risky behaviors, dangerous behaviors, or just certain situations where you want to be aware and just know how to handle them, basically. So we kind of talked to kids about that, and they shared a lot of interesting, a lot of their input, basically. It was really interesting conversations we had with them. I definitely learned a lot. One of the things that was a little bit surprising to me was a conversation I had with one youth that we were kind of talking about the dangers of substance misuse and how that is something that can likely happen. Not at prom, maybe before prom or during after parties, things like that. And one youth had said that they don't believe that there's anything wrong with driving while under the influence of alcohol. And that kind of took me aback a little bit. So we kind of want to emphasize, the importance of driving sober and also just what can happen when drinking and driving, right? And that's not one of the only things that can happen during prom or before prom. This can happen. Other things that can happen are, like I mentioned, youth conflicts. So that can include fights, that can include just arguments that escalate to points where it can probably put other people in danger other than the two people that might get in the argument. Other things that can happen, like I said, after parties also, and maybe there are after parties where there are no responsible adults in these parties. So making sure that the kids are being safe, making sure that there are no adults mingling with, teenagers at these parties. So just kind of being aware of certain things that can happen. Yeah, so kind of going back a little bit to what that one student had talked to me about, right? So they had mentioned that they don't believe there's anything wrong with drinking and driving. Of course, we all know, or a lot of us do know, right? The bad things that can happen, for example, fatal car accidents. And so, according to the Illinois State Police, if you're caught, youth under 21 can be convicted of a DUI and have their license revoked. So that's kind of like on the less fatality end. That's the bare minimum thing that can happen, but things kind of escalating when people can get hurt or potentially killed. Some statistics say drivers under age 21 represent 10% of licensed drivers, but they are involved in 17% of alcohol-related fatal crashes. So people get hurt because the driver is under the influence of alcohol. And it's a youth under age 21, right? So this is a scary statistic, just knowing that they only 10% of those have their licenses, but they kind of account for a higher percentage of those accidents. So we kind of want to prevent those things from happening. There have been other research studies and other places that have shown statistics saying that, a lot of these risky behaviors do take place during prom, after prom. So kind of wanting to emphasize these things during this period for them is really important, because maybe a lot of kids don't know, and it's not for us to judge them or say, like, how do you not know, right? For us, it's common sense as adults who know better. But these kids are still learning, still growing, and so they don't yet know the consequences to their actions and to certain actions that they may partake in. Like I said, risky behaviors that involve substance misuse. And not just alcohol, they can be mixing substances together. So just being aware of things like that can happen. So what are some of these solutions, right? I'm thinking particularly in the drinking, under the influence while driving. So one of the things that I would suggest and that other people suggest is to make sure you have a designated driver. And so basically what that means is you make a plan with your friends. You say, hey, who's the sober one who's not planning on doing anything crazy tonight that is able to drive all of us home, and kind of have that person decided before you go to the party or before you go to prom. And if you don't have a friend with a license, then maybe asking an adult, such as one of your parents, a legal guardian, or one of your friends' parents or legal guardians, who can be that designated parent that will say, hey, I'm going to pick up my daughter and her friends, right? So kind of just making sure you have that aligned before even going to prom is a really important plan to have. And other things you can do is just, if you don't have a person that can pick you up, maybe Uber or Lyft is also another option. But just having that plan before you go to prom, right? So some of the other things I mentioned, such as youth conflict, right? What can happen if youth conflict occurs during their prom? So this can be, people just starting an argument over some misunderstanding, something that's been going on, that can escalate to either just yelling arguments or physical altercations. So in those situations, you kind of have to be aware of your own safety, right? If it's just two people arguing, it's possible. If it's safe enough and you know these people, you can get involved and talk to them, try to de-escalate the situation and intervene. But that's only if it feels safe to do so. If it doesn't feel safe to do so, this is when we kind of suggest, and others have suggested, that once you get to your prom location, right, it's going to be at a venue outside of your high school, so it's going to be a new environment for you, a totally new building that you may or may not have been to before, but just kind of learning the exit routes, the escape routes of those buildings that you're going to be entering. That's going to be really important to know in case there are altercations that can involve just the rest of the bystanders that are in the area, right? Sometimes one small fight can turn into a bigger fight because maybe their friend sees their friend getting hurt and then they want to jump in to help, and then it kind of involves other people and it can escalate in that way. So we kind of recommend just being aware of the building's exit doors, exit if there's windows big enough for people to have to go through, depending, if your building or venue is taking place in the first floor, and just being aware of that. So being safe, taking care of that, and just also telling your friends too, right? Like if things go south, we're going to go through that door. So just knowing and grabbing your friends before you leave, grabbing as many people as you can before you can leave as well, is something that will really help. So Yeah, learning that is very important. Physical fights. So when I say physical fights, right, it can be, people punching, things like that. But just kind of being aware of what's going on too, because if you know these youth, some youth that may be involved in gangs, for example, they might take this and escalate the argument further. There can be people maybe outside waiting to hurt somebody that's inside the prom. So just kind of being aware of the people that are arguing, if you know them, if you don't, just trying to avoid them, trying to avoid any suspicious people waiting outside that may be around the building, and just being in a group is something that's also very important. When you're standing by yourself, you're a little bit more vulnerable because your friends don't know where you are, or parents or nobody really knows where you are. So that's something to be aware of as well. So just being really, really careful when it comes to those things, right? So kind of going back to a little bit of substance use, right? Drinking and driving is one of the risky behaviors that can happen. And youth conflicts is also something that can be a result of drinking or mixing substances, using other substances where people are not in their clear state of mind to make rational decisions. So when making irrational decisions, that can lead to people getting into car accidents, that can lead to youth fighting. It can also lead to people engaging in risky sexual behaviors. There is research that shows, a lot of youth are sexually active. Not There's a percentage of youth that are sexually active, so if they are engaging in underage drinking, that can impair their judgment, and that can kind of lead to maybe not being safe, not being protected, and can cause people to kind of, either harm themselves or harm others when it comes to that kind of thing too. So just being aware of the different consequences that can happen if people are drinking irresponsibly. Ideally, in a perfect world, we would love for our kids to not drink. But this is kind of just for kids to be aware of, for those who are engaging in those behaviors, and maybe their parents don't know about. It's just important for these kids to be informed about it, so that way they can kind of, just know the consequences. But yeah, so kind of moving on to the next thing. What can youth do to be safe if going to an after party? So like I mentioned earlier, with an after party, this is going to take place at a whole new location, right? This is going to take place either at someone's house. It might be a house that you've never been to before. It can be a complete stranger's house, and it's going to be a party full of people that you either may know or totally not know anybody there. But maybe you wanted to go because your friends wanted to go, and you don't want to leave them alone. You want to be a good friend and kind of make sure that they're okay, right? So that is also one thing that you can do to be safe. If you can't keep your friend from going, have someone go with them, or if you're able to go with them to make sure that they're being safe, please, let your friend know, to either share their location on their phone, so that way you can track them. For people that have iPhones, you're able to track your friends via location, or using apps where you can share your location with people that you trust, and that way they'll be able to know where you're at if you choose to go to an after party. Being aware of just also situational awareness, which is something that we have talked about earlier in a few months ago. Just kind of seeing the lay of the land, seeing the vibes, and just making sure that, people look like they're having a good time. If the environment feels a little bit uncomfortable for you, or unsafe, then that's kind of when you use your better judgment to decide, hey, maybe I should leave early or have someone come pick you up. And that's why it's also important to have a friend with you. So that way you both can keep each other accountable and keep each other safe while you're at these parties, where there may not be any responsible adults. Ideally, if there are after parties going on, parents communicate with their children about, oh, I'm going to this after party, it's going to start at this time, and I'm going to be at this location. So you would kind of talk to your parents about, okay, this is the address. If you don't hear back from me, this is where you need to go to come find me. So just being aware of that is really important. Other things too, like I said, share your location, not just with your friends, but also with your parents. Making sure that there's someone that's able to pick you up from this after party or making sure you have a way home afterwards is really important. I know some people or some kids might want to go to an after party and not want to tell their parents that they want to go, just because their parents might not let them. So just kind of being, like I said, use your situational awareness. If you absolutely don't have a ride home and your parents are your last resort, I know that your parents, all they want for you is to come home safe. So that is something that you should not be afraid of doing when you feel, even if you feel like you might get in trouble, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but at the end of the day, what's most important to your parents is your physical and mental safety. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, no matter how scared you might be of your parents. So yeah, that's also something that you might want to just have in the back of your mind. And let's see. So, one of the other things at parties, right, after parties, things that they'll have going on is most likely alcohol. Alcohol that may be distributed to anyone that's at this party. It's not being regulated. They're not checking IDs, obviously, for people that are at these parties. So, just being aware of binge drinking and trying to avoid binge drinking is something that we also say is important. We say avoid binge drinking because if you think about binge drinking, think about kind of like binge eating or binge watching a show, right? You're kind of watching a show back to back without pausing or taking any breaks. Same thing with binge eating. You're eating a lot of food. Maybe you're already full, but you still want to keep eating even though your body doesn't really want anymore, or maybe you're just craving it. So that's kind of the same thing with binge drinking with alcohol. So when you take shot after shot without taking a break in the span of 2 hours is considered binge drinking. There is a recommended amount that people say to learn to pace yourself so that way you're not binge drinking and engaging with that. One of the things that can happen with binge drinking is people can get alcohol poisoning just because of the heavy amount of intake of alcohol going into your system at the same time, especially if you're not eating in between or taking a break to drink water in between. This can just fill up your system with that alcohol, which can lead to alcohol poisoning. So that's one of the dangers of that. Another thing that can happen with binge drinking, it may cause, people to black out and then they may wake up and not remember what happened the night before, right? And I know from people that I've heard that share their experiences of blacking out, it's kind of a scary experience, right? Because you don't know anything that has happened in the last, few hours before you fell asleep, essentially. So it's kind of scary, right? Not knowing what happened, especially if you went there alone. You don't know. No one can tell you what happened, what you did, what other people did. So just kind of being, really careful around that. So making sure that you pace yourself with a drink and take a lot of, drink a lot of water in between. So that way you never get to the point where you ever feel like you're about to black out. Especially in a new environment like a stranger's house at an after party, right? Because there are a lot of people there that you may not know and you may not trust. So just remembering to just be safe and be aware of that. Okay, so like I said, making sure your phone it has location on, I think is one of the most key things to kind of take away from this. And with that, you need to charge your phone, right? So going to prom with your phone charged at 100%, I know a lot of people that do not have their phones charged throughout the day before they leave for work or before they leave for school. And sometimes people forget, which is fine. So if you have a portable charger, making sure you have a portable charger that can keep your phone charged throughout the event is something to, help with that. Because in case anything happens at all, right, you need to let somebody know. And if you're not with other people, the only way to contact anyone is through your phone. And so that's really important to make sure that you have charged and that everything is good with that. So yeah, avoid leaving the house before the phone is charged. And yeah, so I feel like this is definitely a topic that is really important not just for the youth to know, but also for parents to know. Because that way, it's definitely a lot of this is on the parents too, right? Parents have to set clear boundaries with their kid about this is the expectations for tonight. We expect you to be home by this time, or else there's going to be consequences, right? So making sure consequences are established, because a lot of kids, kids don't want to get in trouble. So they want to hopefully do things to avoid getting in trouble, and setting those rules and guidelines with your kids is really important too. So making sure you have constant contact with them is really important. If you are unable to contact your kid, another thing that we recommend too is making sure you have the contact of someone else, one of their friends. So having the contact of a friend of theirs, a best friend, a close friend that you trust and that knows you personally as well, is really important. In case you cannot get a hold of your own child, you are able to call their friend and say, hey, I'm looking for my daughter. Is she with you? So you always have contact with someone who knows your daughter, who is at the school with your daughter, who goes to school and is going to the prom, right? So that's another thing to be aware of. Yeah, so it was very interesting having this talk with my kids and my students. A lot of them are very self-aware and very aware of the things that can happen. We were talking a little bit about other instances where a student from their school, unfortunately, was at a social gathering. It was not a school gathering, but she was from the school that they attend, and there was a shooting at this event, and she unfortunately passed away. So this is something that it may sound maybe crazy to other people, for lack of a better word, but it's a very real thing that can happen in a lot of places. So it's definitely important, especially with the rise of school shootings and things like that. It's definitely important to just be aware of your student, if you're a faculty, and your child, if you're a parent that has a kid going to prom this year, and every year in general. This is very universal to kids just being safe and learning the ins and outs of prom safety. So definitely, have a sit down with your kid before prom. Like I said, explain boundaries, explain things and expectations that you have for them. And then for the students, youth, share this with your friends and make sure you have a conversation with your friends about, hey, you're not going to wander off. You're not going to leave me alone. We're going to stay together the whole night. And for those going to after parties, just making sure that you are not alone with a stranger. One other thing too that I just remembered is being aware of your drinks. If you have like open cups, cans, things like that at a party and you leave it unattended, we recommend do not leave your drinks unattended. Things can happen, people can put things in your drinks, so just kind of being careful with that is really important. But yeah, that's kind of all the facts I got for that. Tips, not facts, but tips, definitely recommendations for youth. We hope that you all take these into consideration for those going to prom this year. We hope that you all have fun and stay safe. And I will be back at the end of May with some mental health awareness talks. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Good night.